Hi everyone, this is Solana from Cortez Tutoring. I wanted to go over some of my favorite resources for tutoring math. Some are pretty basic, you can find at your local Walmart. Others might take a little more research. First off is a whiteboard, and obviously with your pens and erasers, I keep mine in a nice little handy bag, kind of makes it easier to get a hold of. These suckers are nice even from the very beginning. It allows your student to be able to write down any of the problems, work them out, and when erasing it disappears. You use obviously a lot less paper, and also it encourages one, them to show their work, and two, as they're they need to basically transfer their work back onto their actual homework. So kind of it continues to build on the steps and helping them to understand what they're doing when they're working on the problem. So these guys are very handy. I usually try to stock up on them at the beginning of the school year because you can find them pretty cheap. This one only cost me $1, and so I have like 3 or 4 of these. And it really depends on you the size you want. This is kind of nice because it's portable. I'm able to take it with me to sessions, and I can just pull it out of my bag, and it's great. If you're gonna have your student just do their homework at home, you can get a much larger one. You can get one that's mounted on the wall. Various ways, whatever works best, basically, is how I try to swing it. Next, we have various index cards. And these are great on if I just have a handful right here. I have actually an entire drawer full. But these are great for when your child is learning addition, subtraction, just helping to bring home the concepts, and it's help. Sorry. Also, when you have your child make their own cards, they are again going over the facts beforehand, and then going through the cards on a regular basis helps them. These, like I said, great for learning to add, learning to subtract. Very, very important for multiplication and division. I can't really stress enough. And I do encourage my students to use a stack of index cards and write out their facts. And even like in the case of multiplication, usually it just takes them going over their multiplication facts once a day, and you'll see drastic improvement within a couple of weeks. So index cards, very important. Then the other thing is something that, especially for little kids, something that allows them to count. So something to count with. I have these cute little single unit cubes. They're great. I also use old Scrabble tiles. Those are also quite useful, and depending on if your student has an issue with textures, those are nice and smooth, so I tend to have less issues with those. You can also use popcorn, M&Ms, Skittles, something that your student considers a treat. So after they're done with homework, they can, snack on it. So it's kind of a win-win. They get, after they're done, they actually get to have something yummy. The other thing is I like to use base 10 blocks. So this is especially useful when you're trying to teach your student how to count by tens. Also great when you start having to work on multiplication. So these guys, they're like the little unit cubes I have, only each stick has 10 of them together. So again, these are really useful, especially when they're trying to follow some of the examples in some of the math books. They'll tend to refer to the blocks, and I've noticed a lot of children tend to be very tactile when it comes to learning. So if they can handle it, and besides just visually seeing it, actually handling it helps a lot. And then, of course, you move up to the ones that have 100 units. Kind of crazy. And I haven't added it to my collection, but there are the big cubes where you have 100 units on each side. It's a big block, and you can also get those for your child. Those are another available option. So again, all of these are useful just for the hands-on portion. For younger kids and even older kids, I find that fake money helps. You can also just use like pennies or coins, but when it comes to them trying to figure out with counting up coins or dollars, I find that having these things on hand are pretty nice. So this comes in dollars, 5, 10s, 20s, hundreds, and hundreds, sorry. Just double checking. And you come with, a handful of pennies, you got some nickels, dimes, and a handful of fake quarters. Also, some half dollars, which kind of funny, we don't really see those out around anymore or in circulation. So, but when it comes to math problems, some of them still include the half dollars. So it's kind of good to have those on hand, especially for your younger kids. I don't have it with me at the moment, but another thing is, especially again for younger kids, is a little clock that you can actually manually move the hands for. I find that helps them a lot. It allows them to look and move it to the times that they're trying to be learning about, and it's pretty handy for those kinds of math problems. Again, let's see, got all kinds of cool little stuff here. And this is also great for not only younger kids, but older kids when they're having to deal with prisms. I actually got my hands on some blocks that are geometric shapes. So we have, and it's great. Like I said, some kids are very tactile, so being able to hold up a cube and counting the vertices and the edges or the flat surfaces, they're more able to come up with the correct answer when they can handle it versus trying to guess on a piece of paper. This particular one I got came with a pretty nice handful, and again, it's useful too when we get to geometry and they at least have the visual to help them with their math problems. So, let's see. Another cool thing. So, in a later episode, I'll be showing some of the games I use for these, but we have dice, or lots of them actually. So, let's see. I have a 20-sided, a 12-sided, and no, sorry, I have two 12-sided die. Cool. So these are useful for, there's a few games you can play with them, but so I use them for multiplying and adding. There's some for division. Then also we have a nice little cube that has with the different symbols that actually tells the child what they're going to do. So if you roll it and you come up with the times, then the other numbers you roll, you would be multiplying together. If you wind up with division, you'll be dividing. There's addition, subtraction. You even have your um, your inequality symbols, so which is pretty nice. So this is a pretty good all-around piece that allows you to turn math into more of a game, is basically what's going on there. So that is, I consider it a resource. It allows them to go, from their homework to something more fun. And it's even better if they're playing against adults. They feel awesome when, especially for younger kids, they feel awesome when they beat the adults. So now, calculators. I would say for the most part, if you can, I don't encourage them until you get to upper level math. So, and what I mean is when you're at the point where you're having to figure out statistical type problems, or let's say you could probably get all the way up to Algebra 2 without a calculator, in all reality. However, I do have some students who part of their IEPs is they're allowed to use a calculator. And obviously I have older students who need to use one to solve some of their problems within a set amount of time. This current one that I use is a Texas Instrument. This one is one of their 36Xs. It's pretty nice. I'm not going to say it's the best one out there. It's one that I'm very familiar with, which is why I use it. I have students who have used other types of calculators and they work great. And so my recommendation is when you find one that is going to work for your needs, not mine or somebody else's. And also, I know they have some nice, really fancy ones out there. I even have a couple of graphing calculators. But in reality, you're going to be able to get away with just a basic scientific calculator. You don't need the graphing. Those aren't really, all of those functions you're not going to utilize them unless you get into what we call matrices, because up until about then, you're going to want to be able to graph things out yourself and learn to recognize what specific graphs look like. A calculator will actually take that away from you. So this guy, like I said, he's a 36X. This is one of the newer ones. So it's the 36X Pro. Works really great. It does what I need to, and it's great for me to give instructions on when trying to teach my students how to use a calculator to solve more difficult problems. So I do, again, I recommend it after a certain point in math. So now we're going to get on to some books, which, depending on where your student is, that basically will help you decide what kind of book to get. So I tutor K through 12, so I have a pretty broad range of different books to help. And when I say books, I do have a couple of textbooks. They aren't the ones I use those mostly if I need to find extra problems to make examples out of. But when it comes to explaining, I refer to some other books that are more outside the box type thinking. So the first one, I'm sure you've heard your child say this many times, is I hate math. And this book is a little older. I want to say, let me double check. It's copyright 1975. You're gonna have to look at like used bookstores or book sales. I found a couple from the same author. I found a few at library book sales. I pretty lucky on that. This kind of shows a different way of thinking. It's kind of, I guess you could say, outside the box thinking. So if your child is struggling with basic math problems in their assigned book from school, this becomes very helpful. It gives them ideas on how to use math in everyday life, and it's not boring stuff. It's, I'm sure some of the parents that I've worked with, they've probably already heard their child say that they'll do dishes for 1 penny, and but it'll double every day. So the first time 1 penny, even the second time 2 pennies, doesn't seem like much, but after a while it does add up. Or I shouldn't say add up. It's an example of exponential growth. So after a while, it gets to a point where you're paying your child like $5 to do dishes. Not so. And I do warn parents ahead of time. It's mostly to let the kids see how quickly things can increase when you're using exponential growth. And again, that's in this book. There's other examples, and it's very much hands-on, teaching them how to utilize math in everyday experiences, which is great when especially when you have a child who's sitting there saying, I hate math, when am I ever going to use this? It really helps that child find new ways to explore math. And then that's when we go to the next book in the series called Math for Smarty Pants. So this is kind of the lovely introduction. Let's try to get you to start enjoying math and find new ways to explore. This gives you even more ways. So if you find that ideas in the first one are working great, then this one will also, I'm going to guess this one will also work for your child. And again, it's everyday things that allow your child to utilize their math skills. And this one incorporates more word problems, but again, I highly recommend this series. They're called the Brown Paper School Books. I know they were written in the 70s, but sometimes if it worked then, it still does work, especially with math. I honestly can tell you it's a universal language, and there are so many ways to approach a problem, and these books show a different way than we would think about. And my mom actually got me my first one, this one, when I was about 4th or 5th grade because I hated math. And it gave a very completely different outlook, and I encourage my students now to try to think a little more outside of the box because of just my introduction to that book. And then lastly, we have, again, Brown Paper School Book. It's called The Book of Think. And again, this one is actually very much about word problems. So it gives them examples, ways to interpret them, just so your child can tackle word problems without having a panic attack is the best way to explain that. I've had a lot of students who word problems are what causes the most difficulty for them. They can handle problems that have already been set up, 1 plus such and such, even 2x equals 24. They can solve that, but when you give it to them as a word problem, they feel very confused. So the Book of Think helps your child tackle word problems. And again, this entire series is great. I know there are more books in the Brown Paper School book series besides math. Some are a little more outdated, but the math ones I do highly recommend. They're great. And then that is not the only series I recommend. If that doesn't work for your child, that is perfectly fine. Again, all our brains are wired differently, which means that there's going to be different ways to approach problems. If our brains were wired the same, we wouldn't have all these different types of books explaining how to do math or any other subject. It would just be taught. Your child could go to school and learn exactly the same way as everybody else. And but in reality, we all think a little differently. And that's what helps us come up with so many innovative ideas. So the next one is this one, which is How to Be Good at Math. I really like this particular series of books because of I can actually they give really good examples and lots of color. So you're not just sitting there confused. And this is more for the parents to actually look through so they can explain to their child how to do a problem. So this is the first one. It starts off with very beginning with numbers and what they look like, and ends with some basic geometry and even how to recognize formulas and sequences. So a good book to start with if you're already noticing early on that your child is struggling, and like I said, it's a visual guide. It's a great book. And then building off of that, we have the next one, How to Help Your Kids with Math. And notice, I've used this book so much, I've had to put tabs on the areas so I can just flip them open and go straight to the area for explanations. So this is a really good book. It's, I'd say covers maybe right up to about 5th grade math. So, which is great. You end with probability. Again, it starts with numbers, but this is where they're learning things about rational, irrational, everything and everything in between. It's great, actually. And again, they get pictures. I don't want you to get all boggled with, oh my goodness, that looks like a lot. I just opened it to a random page. They build on everything throughout here, giving explanations. It makes it a lot easier for parents to explain. So, and then we have this one, the Everything You Need to Ace Math in One Big Fat Notebook. This is about middle school math, so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And again, you can see I've utilized it a lot, so it has lots of tabs. And this is set up as if you were looking at somebody's notebook. So you got the nice little lines, you got this particular one, it gives you little quizzes so you can check and make sure that you actually understand what's going on before going on to the next part. They give very simple definitions, which I really like, because sometimes the more complicated a definition, the more confused your student's going to get. So if you have a much simpler definition that gets straight to the point, that's even better. And this will do that. So again, this is about middle school. There's a whole series here, but right now I'm just covering resources for math at the moment. So this is, I'd say, a must if you have a middle schooler who is in school. This, again, gives a lot of great information and in one book. So now we have another lovely series here. And most of the books I've been showing are books that have to do with thinking a little differently than what our normal textbooks show you. So this one is called Math Doesn't Suck. It actually pretty good title. I know, because a lot of us, I mean, even me included, have flat out said math sucks. And this is kind of nice. There's a series of 4 of them. They're set up to look almost like a teen magazine. So you got things like you got little crazy little titles for articles in there. So while the cover looks like a magazine, you can tell it's not a magazine. And I do like it. It's some outside of the box type thinking. They give some examples, other examples that might be more relatable to your student than some of the ones that we get when we're in school. Some kids don't really care how fast a train is going when the wind is blowing at 25 miles per hour. It doesn't matter to that kid. So this just gives some a different another way to look at math. She has a whole series. So you wind up, this is the first one, and this is about middle school. So if you have a middle school child, this might be a good one to start them on. And it is, with the covers and stuff, you can tell it's geared a little more towards females, or it's a little more feminine, which if your child is more into that, that might be a little better, a little more relatable for them. So her next book is called Kiss My Math. This covers pre-algebra concepts. So again, you're going to get some different examples. They're great. They're a little different than what you would normally find in your textbook, but it's a, like I said, it's a good book, and and this would be good for your pre-algebra student. So then we get right into her algebra book. And I don't want to really call it a book. It's not like a textbook. She gives examples. She even gives examples of word problems. And it's different, and it's a different way to approach math. And I'd say, coming from somebody who, she is a mathematician, and I know some of you might recognize her. She was on, oh man, I just lost it. Oh, Wonder Years. Sorry. So she's, she has a little bit of celebrity status, but she does know her stuff. She's not some random celebrity who decided to write a book. She actually does know and understand mathematics. So this is one of the reasons why I do recommend her. And I should say, I was introduced to her books by one of my students. So as a tutor, not only do I teach, but I also learn. So it's kind of a nice little trade-off. And then her last book, Girls Get Curves. And as you can tell, it's about geometry, and hence curves. But again, if your child is doing well with the first three, then this is probably another one you want to get when your child gets to geometry, and help them understand geometry in a way that makes sense to them. So, like I said, this is really great, and I recommend her books. And then, let's see if I can pull these up. Oh, yeah. I don't do anything easy, apparently. So, first of all, when I know we have books out there called, the For Dummies series or The Idiot's Guide, and the titles themselves can feel insulting, but they have some really good examples. So, to start off, we have Algebra 1 for Dummies. Let's see if I can get this. And again, it's not to be insulting. It's not even to insult my students. It actually has some really good step-by-step examples, and which is the reason why I have this book in my collection. Because I've been tutoring for over 18 years now, and I still will come across a student who thinks differently than what I've been exposed to, and I need to find new ways to explain techniques to them that will make sense to my student. And some of the For Dummies books really do help in that area. So I have the Algebra 1. Again, like I said, great examples. Great book if you or one of your students is taking Algebra 1. And then on the For Dummies books, I have the Algebra 2 workbook for dummies. So so it has lots of practice problems, but it also gives really good examples, really good explanations. So this is another one I recommend if you or one of your students is taking Algebra 2 and they're struggling. Unfortunately, different schools now call Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 by different names, but you can kind of, by glancing over at the problems, you can start to recognize which one you're looking for. So next is college algebra demystified. So kind of, this one's really nice. I like that it kind of covers both Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 in one nice simple book. And so I've also pulled this one out, again, mostly for the examples. All of these have great examples, and the good thing is most of them have different examples. So it makes sense to kind of go through and figure out which one's going to work best with the student I'm currently working with. So, college algebra demystified, really good. And then lastly, for geometry, at the moment I only tutor up to geometry. I am working on relearning some of my trig skills, so hopefully that will be offered at sometime in the near future. So for geometry, I do recommend Cliff's Quick Review for geometry. I don't know why they call it quick, because if you can tell, it's not really a tiny book. This gives, mostly it is about the different theorems that you're going to use. So I don't know if anybody remembers taking geometry, or it might be, that one class you wanted to block from your memory because it was traumatizing. That's when you get introduced to proofs. So, and even to this day, I do sometimes have trouble remembering which theorem is supposed to go to what. So when I'm explaining, this sucker does help. I can look it up and be able to go, okay, this is the theorem and this is what you need to know about it. And this is why it comes in handy. They do give examples of using particular theorems, which is nice. Unfortunately, if you remember taking geometry, we don't have not all theorems are have a specific name. They just have things like theorem 21, theorem 22. So it makes it a little more difficult when it's a lot harder to call it off the top of your head. So this guy, very useful. And again, it is not a substitute for what your student has to learn. It's more of a supplement. So your child can use it to make references, or if they don't understand the theorem when it's explained in a textbook, they can take a look here and see if it makes more sense. So that is all I have at the moment as to recommendations for math resources. And hopefully in the near future, we will be putting up recommendations for language arts. So hope you guys all have a nice day. And if you're curious about Cortez Tutoring, go look us up on Facebook and if you have any subjects that you would like a better explanation for, please comment in the comment section and I will try to get a video out as soon as there's a high enough demand. Thank you.